Hello, Internet. It's time for an impromptu Wednesday serial that even I wasn't ready for until a few minutes ago, so this is gonna be a little bit janky. So I'm gonna take you on a reader's journey, if you will. I have heard about Kamandi-WS Boy on Earth for a while. It's been rotating through the community. A lot of people really seem to like it, and I was interested. And I went to go try to procure myself a copy, and for whatever reason, I wouldn't let myself look at it unless it was an issue number 1 to start with, and unless I went online and paid a bit more than I was willing to get into something I had no conception of. I couldn't, and there was a few issues at my shop, but for whatever reason I wasn't really willing to just dig in. So I just kind of let it lie. And this came up at some point when I was talking with SLEEPYREADER, and he said, just whatever, just jump in. And I'm like, nah, I mean, maybe it's my problem, maybe it's holding me back, but when I'm reading a series, especially something that's already done, I'd rather just start from the beginning and work through it. Just read it as it was meant to be read and just work my way through it. Otherwise, I don't really want to bother. So that's just my hang-up, whatever. And he's like, I don't get that, but whatever. And so I just thought that was just going to be where it lied. So this morning I wake up, and it turns out he had gifted me through Comixology, which is something I didn't know you could do, but you can. He gifted me the first 4 issues of Kamandi, and was like, here, just read it. Read from the beginning, you weirdo. And so I have. And I have to say right off the bat, I was right. This story moves forward very explicitly, and everything is building from where it was last. And you don't necessarily need to know everything that was prior, but if you didn't read the last issue prior, you're going to be really confused as to where they're starting. And it just presses forward. And so I'm really glad I read the first issue, especially because, for those not in the know, Kamandi-WS Boy on Earth is a Jack Kirby tale where Kamandi is running through and randomly discovers this great animal civilization. And it starts off with cats fighting each other, so like leopards are fighting tigers, and he gets taken in by a dog and meets another man, and that's most of the first issue, and there's so much action while all this dialogue is being presented. It's very old school comic booky, which is great. So every panel is amazing and dynamic and colorful, while we're getting the story told out in the middle of people like talking while fighting, which is something that I guess was considered not as realistic. We don't see as much anymore, but that's how comics work. That's how they work best for action-adventure tales, at least. Because this is a Jack Kirby tale, I'm obliged to talk about the art. This is the first real Jack Kirby creation I've ever read. I've read a few of the older Marvel issues where he's done some stuff that never particularly grabbed me, but this is the first thing that's truly just Jack Kirby. He had someone help with inking, but he wrote, penciled, and colored. I think it's fair to say that's a Jack Kirby comic through and through, and he had hand and help, and that's cool, but that's just like a shade short of Solo. Literally. And so it was just amazing to me how dynamic it was, and I've never really been a big fan of Kirby art, which I know, oh my god, but reading this, get it now, like the way it flows, the dynamicism, the room for the bubble is right there, and the backgrounds are there when they need to be there, and when they don't need to be there, they're not there to clutter anything. And the level of detail is just perfect enough to keep your eye on the panel and interested, but also keep it moving at the right pace, so it's very, like, kinetic and flowing, and you can feel the action, but you can also input some of your own, because if you look at how fast this comic moves, that's almost another mini topic itself. Jump cut. So the pacing is just like we're jumping from one thing to the next, which I'd almost argue is slightly problematic at times when the characters are just talking amongst themselves. Like Kamandi will be talking with his other human compatriots, and they'll be like, oh, okay, well, we can do this, and then all of a sudden there's a gunshot from nowhere. They're like, oh, they're on us, and I'm like, did you not see them coming in the distance at all? No? Okay. I mean, literally, basically, the only problem I can levy at this, and that was the times. But I mean, the fact that they're talking on one page and the next, boom, we're in another action, that's the thing, is you can read every panel as a beat, and then one panel has like one bit of dialogue, and then it jumps to another, and there will be a different action beat, and they might be reacting to that. And then every page kind of has a slightly larger idea, and then sometimes it's a page spread, sometimes it isn't, as per the flow of the story, but whatever. And then like one issue is one thing, and then it jumps right into the next, but the first bit will call back to the last one, so the adventure just keeps pressing on. Which, like I said, is really great, but it also makes me wonder how you would parse this comic when you haven't read the previous issues. I wouldn't be able to handle that, especially with it moving so fast. You'd miss so much in one issue. Basically the equivalent of 6 issues today. And what's even crazier is in each issue there's 3 chapters. And I don't understand what those chapters are supposed to be. If I didn't know better, my assumption would be that Kamandi was published in like some sort of greater magazine, and these chapters came out like bi-weekly or something, and then these issues were collections of that and then put out. That would be my assumption from my understanding of like other cultures and how comics work and some of comics history, and frankly just fiction publication history. But that's not the case here. And then why do we have these chapters that don't really deviate anything from one page to the next within an issue? If someone knows that, please let me know, because that's really interesting. It's something you see a lot more in older comics, especially with that old group. Maybe it was just the era, maybe it was just certain creators, I have no idea. Another interesting thing, too, is how much the story really does stick to the story. It made me realize, like, when people complain about comics being preachy now, more of where they're coming from. Not that I necessarily agree, because I like my stories to be about something. And Kamandi's kind of about stuff, but never directly. So, like, in the first issue, you know, Kamandi's there, and then he gets bum rushed, and then these 2 cat tribes, or clans, or however you want to distinct them, kingdoms really, are attacking each other. They're at war with guns and hollow scooters and I don't know, crazy Kirby technology. And they're against each other because they're different kinds of cats. So, I mean, there's like this implied level of racism, but it's never touched on beyond that. Like, it's just there, and you will make of it what you will. And then Kamandi presses on, and then at the end of the issue, he sees another man, and I guess he's the last boy on Earth, but they're other men, which is, I don't know, kind of a misnomer. It may, when I was thinking about getting this comic before, I thought it was going to be something completely different, more like Prophet. And instead, this is more like Black Sad. Or not Black Sad, Black Science. how did I mix that up? And it's like Black Science because they keep pressing forward, and every time there's kind of a jump, they're onto some crazy new thing. Now, obviously, it's not as divisive as Black Science. It's actually more organic and therefore easier to follow. But yet more action-packed, more things happen. I'd argue you can get more out of it, more per issue, just because of the way comics are written then and now. Both great comics. I'm not trying to put one down over another. I'm just saying one does this, one does that. And so yeah, so he sees a man at the end of the issue, and he finds a purpose in that like, oh, he wants to find humanity and give them future, and they kind of re-establish that in a different way at the end of the 4th issue, when there's kind of this lost technology of man, and he knows about the history of man, and it seems that like the idea that man used to rule the planet and that we invented all this, and especially like spoken language, is lost on all these animals that evolved up and became more sentient, which I mean is obviously like crazy sci-fi or whatever, but the way they play it, like there's a certain scientific sense to it. It's played enough so it's not just pure fantasy, but kind of really soft sci-fi, which makes it a lot more engaging, I think, because it's not just like anything's happening just cause. It's like, oh, there's a line of logic here, so if we follow that, like there's more rules to the universe. It just makes it that much richer for that small thing. And for that, again, like you could read into this all these different ways, but they never explicitly say stuff because the comic's moving so fast. They have to stay on the adventure, and maybe they get a line of dialogue here or there to like touch on an issue. It's just such a different world, but it's so interesting to read a comic in that way. And sorry I'm so scatterbrained. I just took in a lot of like info. And what was also really interesting about reading this was it gave me a chance to try to read some comics purely digitally. I have a tablet, but I didn't want to bother with some of that, so I just read it on the browser in-app way. And what's crazy is, again, older comics read better digitally than newer comics overall, because now we're so enamored with the 2-page spread and pushing these panels all the way down the page, and our screens are generally more movie-based now, and never have been more vertical. That's never been a thing unless you tilt screens for shmups or something weird. I don't know. But so reading and scrolling down is like really interesting, because on the grid, or even if you go a little beyond the grid, your panels go across, so you can scan down and take in the information, still enjoy it, and then you get a nice big digital computer screen of this. And I read it on the 1-page way, where it fills up as much screen as possible, because if you read on the 2-page, it's really scrunched, and if there's a big dialogue bubble, it's really hard to read. And so so I have this Kirby art, and I'm just looking at it. And another thing too, I realized part of the reason I liked the Kirby art more today than I have previously is because of the digital. A lot of the older Kirby stuff I read was printed on just crap, and the colors and everything were printed very poorly. And when you see them digital, it's so clean and crisp, you're like, oh my gosh, it does look better. No matter how you slice it, it looks better. It's not as nice as having it on a page, sure, but the difference of essentially quality of the image, not the image, it's not the quality of the image of the drawing. I mean, this is a Kirby drawing, and so I'm saying, like, whether you looked at it digital here versus on like some really crappy page is such a world of difference. It kind of let me in and let me see what people are talking about it, and compare it closer to the way I look at most of my comic art, because the printing standards, I realized, especially by the time I got into comics in essentially the mid-90s, when I would have cared about any differences anyways, the printing standards had shot up, and throughout the 90s, like, really took leaps and bounds versus where it used to be. And there was some stuff in the 80s, if there was something special, they'd try to put forward some quality, and that's when they had started playing with, like, digital coloring and able to do a lot of stuff to actually take the technology they had, or show that if they furthered the technology, the level of quality was something worth doing. That equates to a lot of price jumps in comics at the time. But yeah, but I mean, looking at that difference, it does make a huge amount of difference, and I think that's part of the reason maybe some people look at older comics so much differently than now, is that printing difference. And it's something I never really thought before as to the art in a comic. So yeah. So anyways, there you go. Some initial reactions to Kamandi, talk about digital comics, and again, thank you, SleepyReader666. Go... No, you know what? If you're watching my channel, you're already on his channel. I know it. I've seen the differential in viewers and subscribers, and if there's one person left, just... I don't need any exclusive fans anymore. I'm done. Whatever. Speed me. I don't care. If I get free comics, who cares, right? That's awesome. Thanks, man. So yeah, that's it for my impromptu what the hell thing today. There you go. Bye. Oh, and P.S. I just saw this, and I wanted to add this to our little bit of conversation to give you some of the exchange we have. I mentioned to Damien that I was reading it, and I said, like, how can you parse this if you didn't read it in order? He says, it takes an IQ of 135 or higher, but for those of lower intellect that wish there were more caption boxes explaining everything 3 or 4 more times. Fair. Reading this really takes me back and makes me get the appreciation of the past age of comics a bit more, and makes me a bit more wary of some of the lesser entries on our shelves these days, I guess. Oh. We do get spoon-fed a lot, don't we? And I love it. Oh well, there you go.